Hello, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Health and Wellness Summit. I am your host, Courtney Miracle, and I have the amazing Stephanie Powell joining me today. She is a lot of things. So, Stephanie, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the amazing things you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, hi, everybody. I am Stephanie Powell. I am a speaker. I am an expert brand and business strategist. I'm an authenticity expert. And within all that, one of the things that I jam out on and nerd out on the absolute most is what I affectionately attribute the science behind the woo, right? Because hopefully we all know mindset work is just so crucial and so important. And sometimes it can be hard to grab onto the woo or the full woo woo if you've never been there before. But when you start really digging into the science behind all that, that's where I super nerd out and just get really giddy and just love working within that specific aspect of mindset work.
Yeah, I love it. So when your clients come to you, what do you see as sort of a commonality trying to get people to understand the woo and maybe understand some of the science, and are you met with a lot of resistance from certain people or from a lot of people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've really been fortunate. I don't feel like I'm met with a lot of resistance, but I really also think that's partially because of the approach that I take, right? I think that when people hear, a lot of people, when they hear mindset work, if they've never experienced it, that automatically categorizes into this woo woo of, okay, you're going to tell me to think happy thoughts. And that doesn't work. You know what I mean? If it works, then we all would be fulfilled and content and, whatever.
Empowered and all of the things.
Right. It's really about, so the kind of the first couple of things that I love talking to my clients about to sort of discern them and to really kind of let them know what I'm talking about when I start talking about the science, right? My favorite thing to touch on is, that your subconscious doesn't process negatives.
Okay.
And for a lot of people, they're like, wait, what? And so the perfect example is, okay, whatever you do not, I repeat, do not think about a purple cow. Don't do it. Don't think of a purple cow. And what are you thinking of? A purple cow, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because your subconscious its language speaks in images a lot. And so when we're thinking about, because one of the things I see so much are those of us that have started to understand that where you focus, you tend to grow, right? You tend to amplify. And so if we're constantly focused on our problems or complaining, we know that that's not a good place to be. But for me, it became about, you know what? Well, here's what I don't want. Yeah. I don't want to be struggling. I don't want this. And understanding that the subconscious just heard the stuff. It didn't hear the negative part, right? And understanding it's so much more about not focusing on the negative, but actually reframing to focus on what you do want, because what you focus on expands, right?
And I think that's so hard for people because I talk to this with my clients all the time, right? I own a gym. I also coach coaches, but it's like, well, what do you want? And that is a really hard question for people. They're like, I don't know. They know what they don't want, but they haven't actually ever figured out how to make that shift or how to even let themselves go to that place of what they do want. And so, like you said, all of their thoughts are like, I know I don't want this stuff. I don't know what I want. Right. And so do you have a process where you teach people how to start doing the reframing that you were talking about?
Yeah, not really a process, but one of the simplest things that I'll walk my clients through. And by the way, I love that because it's such a simple but such a powerful question. Tell me what you want. Or if I can wave a magic wand, what would I do for you right now? And that, man, it's so hard. And so, the first step truly is, it's really just cultivating that self-awareness, right? And so when I'm talking to my clients, if they say, well, I know I don't want, we'll kind of just take a really gentle pause right there and go, cool, love that we've identified that. So if you don't want this, just focusing on that piece, what would you want in place of it? Even if it just means in that moment that we're just talking about the direct opposite. So if it's that I don't want an empty pipeline, then you do want a full pipeline, right?
Yeah.
And really just understanding, and because we're training the brain, we're literally rewiring those neural pathways to become aware.
Right.
And the more, it's practice makes perfect, right? So the more that we do that, the more we're able to catch those thoughts as soon as they pop into our heads, and really just giving them permission to just shift it right then and there in the moment. It doesn't mean that you have to have the next 25 years of your life planned out down to the day, right? That's actually way above any of our pay grades.
Yeah, right.
No, you don't have to say, well, I want, to make $212,000 and 82 cents. You don't, I mean, you can, and that's great if you know that number. But in the beginning, it's just the awareness and catching yourself and trying to, maybe you enlist a partner or a best friend or somebody else to kind of help with that accountability and go, when you hear me say, I don't want, can you help me so that I can go, okay, if I don't want to gain more weight, I actually want to lose weight, right? If I don't want to get sick, I want to stay healthy, and just those little itty bitty things. But those little shifts really, really matter, and they start to add up so that it becomes habit.
I feel like the next, I'm gonna ask you this. I don't know what your answer is gonna be. So I feel like for most people, clients I've worked with, I've done this myself. I'm like, okay, I don't want this. I do want this. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, now I gotta know how, which for most of us, the how isn't actually the thing. Like there has to be some how. But do you see that with your clients? You're like, well, that's great. I want to have $212.82. But before I can see that, I need to know how I'm going to get there.
Yes. Not only have I seen it with my clients, I do it. You know what I mean? Like I'm still in a process of reminding myself that
Me too. Totally.
That's not my job. That's not my job. And that's really, really, really hard to grasp onto, right? Because especially for those of us, like I was born in 81. So the 80s, 90s, and before, we grew up very much, and I hate to say conditioned because that's kind of a dirty word, but it was this idea of, okay, so here's what success looks like, right? Like you go to school, you graduate from high school, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a job in that field, you climb the ladder, and as long as you're making the next logical step, you're successful.
Yep.
Well, that pathway is very charted out.
Yeah.
So then when you take us and go, can you just erase all that?
Yeah.
There's that internal panic that sets in and goes, no, I need to know how. And so really it becomes more about, okay, where can we refocus that energy? Because it can't just go away. It's unrealistic to tell someone just to stop thinking about it. And it's like, how can we refocus this? We've got all this energy that's dying to know, how are we going to get there? And so one of the things that I really focus on, and I encourage my clients to focus on, I think the biggest thing that we can do when we're trying to grow and scale our business and reach more people, or just, even just grow in our personal lives, right? Forget the how for a minute and instead ask yourself, how can I show up today?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How can I show up and how can I serve?
Yep.
Right? Even if that means serving yourself, that's okay. And that's necessary. But how can I show up and how can I serve? And as simple and as counterintuitive as this may seem to so many people, what's going to excite you to do in that day? Right? And granted, we're all intelligent human beings. So if every day it's going to excite you to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos and binge watch, that's not what we're talking about. Right? That's not what we're talking about. But is it going to be exciting for you to show up in that day and give yourself a day of rest or self-care? Is it going to be exciting for you to work on creating? Is it going to be exciting for you to work on connection and reaching out to people? How can you show up and serve? And really focusing on becoming a conduit, right? Which a conduit doesn't concern itself with the end point.
Right.
You're just the vessel for how it's going to, you know what I mean? But again, it's refocusing that energy and going, okay, well, I've got all this nervous energy because I don't know how I'm going to get where I'm going to get. Where can I freaking put it? And what can I do with it?
Yeah.
And that I think is super key. And then allowing yourself, I think the other really super key point to that, by the way, is, and I laughed at this and I blew it off. I thought it was so cheesy, but trying to get into a habit of daily is best, but really focusing on kind of what your wins were for that day. Because again, what you focus on expands. And really where that becomes intentional is because as you start to release the how, you will start racking up wins. But if you don't train your brain how to see them, then you're not taking in the proof that what you're doing is working.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so big. Yeah. I mean, so many of us don't ever like, it's, you know, I talk to my clients about this all the time. I'm like, okay, I don't want you to have a to-do list of 25 things. I want you to do 3. And then at the end of the day, you need to like check those off and win. Right. And we do it. I do it with my kids. So I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And we saw this even coming up in them. And so it was like every day, like, what did you learn? What did you fail at? And what are you proud of? And like, we ask our clients that, like, inside of our gym and inside of our other coaching business. And again, something that's super hard for people to be like, I'm not there yet, right? The win then game. I can only be proud of myself when I make the 212. It's like, no, like, and as you start to, and I mean, I'm sure you can speak on the neurology behind what happens with those positive reinforcements that keep people moving in their health and wellness, in their business, in all of that stuff. And that's some of where the woo meets the science, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I love all that. And the reality is when it comes to sort of some of the neurology behind that, now, obviously I'm not a neurologist, right? Just kind of put that out there, put that little statement out there. But what we have to understand about our brains is that it's really not working against you. Our brains, at the basal nature of our being, they are wired for survival. That's what your subconscious is doing, right? It's to keep you safe. Because if you take it to all the way back in the days when we were hunters and gatherers, okay, we had to constantly be alert, and what was known was safe.
Yep.
Right? We're not going to go around this random mountain because there may or may not be something behind there that wants to eat us.
Right.
So with all that being said, when we encounter something that's unknown, that is unsafe. That's why we get those warning signals, right? So back to kind of what you're saying, because we're wired for survival, we are actually wired to see problems before we see solutions, because that's how we live. That's how we survive,
right?
Is to see the problem ahead of time and not get caught in it. And so what we do is every time we do a certain action or a thought pattern leads to an action, it's basically just like if you're carving, you carve out even deeper a neural pathway, and those get super solidified.
Yep.
So if we want to rewire those, again, it's just like anything else. If you want to train your body to move in a different way, it's going to be real awkward at first. It's not going to feel natural. You'll probably feel stupid, and it probably won't get it right immediately. But it just becomes practice over and over and over. And then all of a sudden you're doing that movement like you came out of the womb doing it. And it's the same thing with recognizing those wins. How will we ever train our brain to see those if we don't train our brain? You know what I mean? It's training. You have to do it. And that's just, I think that's why writing down wins is so powerful, because you can go look over your calendar, really give it some time, and don't worry about big or small. A win is a win.
Yeah.
And then the other beautiful part about that, for anyone watching, listening, whatever, when you're having a crappy day, go back and look over those wins and remind yourself of every freaking thing you have accomplished. Yeah. Because all of a sudden you're reminding your brain, I am actually not a failure.
Right.
Let me, and because it's the proof, right? That's where we go back to the proof. Your brain needs proof for it to accept whatever it is you're trying to feed it. It's waiting for you to go, show me. And then when you show it, it goes, maybe this is correct.
And your brain loves to go find evidence, right?
Yeah,
like if you have the feeling of anxiety, your brain's like, cool, you're feeling anxious. I'm going to go find a reason you're feeling anxious. And your body's like, cool. Okay. You just confirmed I'm anxious. Shit, not really anxious, right? Like and there's that feedback loop. So if you can give it different evidence, and new evidence, then all of that stuff starts to shift, right? And it doesn't happen overnight, and it's none of that, but it's like it's recreating like you said, those pathways and that understanding, which I mean, I do a lot of breath work and that kind of stuff. And it's like then that starts to be sensations in your body. And when you get that you working, like I believe, and I don't know what you believe, but I believe mindset and emotionality go hand in hand. And when you start to understand that, it's like, oh, I really can change how I think and how I feel and how I show up and how I act and all of those things, right? By bringing awareness to them.
Yeah, no, you're so right. One of the things that I've studied and I still continue to study is neuro-linguistic programming.
Yep.
And so, you're so right in the far, man, our mindset and our emotions, and they're so linked to us physically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we're anxious, so you hit on a key point that I talk about with my clients in the sense that your subconscious will never make you a liar.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
always going to prove you right. Always. So if you
Yeah.
think you're a failure, it will prove you right. It will find it. Okay. The other thing about it is that so it's a cycle, right? Your physical state feeds your emotional state, feeds your physical state, and over again. That's why things like, especially for those of you that are Grey's Anatomy fans, when they talk about the superhero pose, right? Standing with your feet apart, hands on your hip, chest out. The reason that makes a difference is because your body is standing in a confident way, and your brain picks up on that, and it goes, we're standing like we're confident. Maybe we're confident right now. And it's a reinforcing thing. So when you talk about breath in particular, right? I have a mentor that talks a lot about breath work, and I actually restarted my little daily reminders on my watch, because when we are in thrive mode, our heart rate is lowered, our blood pressure is lowered, and our breathing rate is stable. And so if at any point during the day that gets elevated, you've put your brain in a state of fight or flight. It doesn't matter that it's not tangible danger of something eating you. It's danger. It's danger. And when we bring awareness to our breath and lower all of that, that tells your brain that we're safe. There is nothing to fear. We are safe. And so you're right. Those things work so beautifully together. And the reality of the situation is you're proving yourself right, whether you're intending to or not. And so the question isn't, is my brain finding proof? The question is, what is my subconscious finding proof of?
Yes.
It's going to prove you right, whether, either way. So you might as well have it prove you right on the stuff that you want.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's so funny. We write quotes in the bathroom of our gym, and one of them, and I don't even know if it was Yoda, but someone wrote this on there, and it was like, whether you believe you can, you can't, you're right. And they tagged Yoda. I don't know if that was really in Star Wars or not, but it's so true, right? Like you said, your brain will go find evidence of whatever you want to believe. So I love that. So when you're working with your clients, how quickly do people start to see these shifts?
It depends on how much they're willing to put in the work, right? You understand this, you own a gym. If you want to change something, you have to put in the work. And if you expect it to happen overnight, you're going to be disappointed.
Yes. Expectation is the death of joy, right?
You don't get to go into the gym, work out for 2 days, and come out with a whole entirely new body. That's not how it works. And so keeping your expectations in check, I think, is crucial, right? It's not about, and actually, I have, because of a friend and a mentor, I have basically started eliminating the when out of my vocabulary. Because when we set a date, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in 3 months. Okay. Mm-hmm. What if you lose 9? Then technically you failed your goal, but you lost 9 pounds, right? And it just becomes about, I'm going to show up and do the work that I need to do to reach this goal, and I'll get there when I freaking get there. And so keeping expectations in check is really important. But I think too, it's, are you willing to do the work? Because here's the thing, it is work.
Yeah.
Are you willing to try something that seems silly to you? Are you willing to step outside your comfort zone? And the willingness that there is within there, that determines how quickly results are seen. Yep. Now, it also depends on how deeply rooted some of those stories, beliefs, things like that are being held. Sometimes it shifts in layers, and there are a whole lot of layers. And so again, it becomes about adjusting your expectations. Did you shift a little bit further than you did the day before or the week before? Great, then you're making progress, and that's what matters. But if people aren't willing, you got to have application ultimately, I guess is what I'm saying. It doesn't do any good to just make it sounds really good in your head and you're like, I love that. Cool, what's the action that you're doing behind it? Because if there's no action, there's no change.
I love that. Oh, so good. I feel like we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
It's funny when you talk about the identity piece. We had a client that was he was doing a weight loss thing with us, and we don't really do that anymore, but it's an interesting story when you talk about, like, he was doing all of the work and he was doing all the things, but he would get to this certain point and he would get stuck, per se. And we finally realized after going deeper with him that he had an identity of being the big guy. And so like he was never going to get past a certain point because he still subconsciously had the identity of the big guy. And so if he lost any more weight, he couldn't be the big guy.
Yep.
But what's so interesting when people are doing this work, whether it's for their business or their health or their wealth, it's like there are these stories that unless you continue to dig and to do the work and to get quiet and do those things, like you don't even know that that was running the show. And like when we said that to him, he was like, yeah, I guess that is. And then everything changed, right? And so it's I love what you're doing. I love, I love how you're helping people. If you could give the watchers, listeners, like one tip of something they could do today, tomorrow, that would start them down this journey, what's your favorite tip?
Oh my goodness.
She didn't know this was coming, you guys.
No, that's such a good /hard/horrible question. One thing. Oh man.
Or two. I a couple.
I could say a lot of different things, but the one that keeps just wanting to push to the forefront of my mind, it's probably going to be really unexpected for a lot of people for me to say this, but it would be that you need to carve out some time, whatever that looks like for you. Is it a day? Is it half a day? Is it an hour? And just give yourself a minute to just daydream and dream. That really is a starting point for me, because until you give yourself permission to do that and write that down and see what that looks like, you don't really know what's possible and you don't really know what you're aiming for, right? And I love the idea of dreaming because it puts it in such a positive light. Instead of focusing on all the things of, man, I wish this wasn't this way and this wasn't this way, just, ideal world. And granted, keep it based in reality, right? Because ideal world, I've gotten my letter to Hogwarts and I'm off. Okay. That's probably not the case. So in an ideal world with what's, possible in this plane that we operate in, what does that look like? Like, what is that dream for you? Is it working from a beach every day? Is it working 2 hours a day? Is it traveling? Is it going into an office Monday through Friday for 6 hours a day? It's okay. Whatever it is okay. But what is that dream for you? And giving yourself permission to go, it really is, if I could make the money I want to make, doing what I love to do, what would that look like? And giving, because like I said, that you got to be, it's authenticity, right? Yeah. Be honest with yourself about what you want and what's on your heart. And that's when that opens up the door to explore, okay, what avenues could I potentially go down to start getting one step closer to whatever that is? Because I really do. Pablo Picasso, if you can dream it, it's real. That's not his exact quote, but and this is science too, by the way. If it's not possible, your brain couldn't conceive it. That's not right. Like you cannot conceive things that are impossible. So if your brain has conceived it, then that means that it is a potential reality. Yeah. It's just whether or not you have the courage to admit it and then go after it.
Yeah. And I love that. That's the idea that everything's created twice, like once in your mind and then in your reality. But I think I love dreaming. I love that's what you said, because when we ask people, where do you want to be? What do you want? And they're like, I don't know. Right. And it's like, okay, well, just dream about it. Then it seems safer. It's easier.
Yeah.
It's a dream. But then you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, if I do want that, how do I start down that path? What do I want my life to look like? And like you said, then you can start to take those steps. So I love that. I love that. Well, tell the people how they can find you. Where are you? Facebook, website. Where's the best way to connect with you?
So super easy, right? My name is Stephanie Powell. So last name is Powell. Everything under the sun is more Powell to you, like more power to you. But
I love it.
So it's MOREPOWELLTOYA. My website is morepowelltoyou.com. Facebook, LinkedIn, it's all, / more Powell to you. My group on Facebook, it has some amazing freaking people in it. Magical AF Entrepreneurs, but it's facebook.com/groups/ more Powell to you. So if you search more Powell to you, you will find me 100,000%. And I would love to connect with anybody who's watching or listening. That's literally one of the joys in being able to run an online business, is just getting to connect with so many amazing people.
I agree. Oh my God, I agree so much with that. And the summit has been so fun for me because I just get to interview amazing people. I'm like, I should do this for like a living. No, but not really. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is a blast.
You and I will connect more. We have a ton in common. So I appreciate you being here,
Yeah.
and I appreciate you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Bye.